This is Climate Curious, the podcast for people who are bored, scared, or confused by climate change.
I'm Mariam Pasha, the director and curator at TEDx London and the co-host of this podcast, alongside the amazing Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben Hurst, activist and advocate exploring what positive masculinities can look like, and self-confessed climate normie. We joined activists, storytellers and futurists for an afternoon of talks, music and presentations on the many possible futures growing from ecologies of collapse at the Symbiocene in Brooklyn, New York City. Hosted by our friends over at Queer Brown Vegan and Nowadays on Earth, we hear from Wawa Gatheru, Willow Defabar, Kalpana Arias and Isaias Hernandez. P.S. The term Symbiocene was coined by environmental philosopher Glenn Albrecht. And inspired by this term, we believe that we can rewrite the stories of ecologies. In collaboration with the Superseed podcast, we sat down with some of the panelists for a little behind-the-scenes chat on what's been in and what's been out during Climate Week NYC 2023. You can listen to the full panel discussion over on Superseed's podcast feed. Follow the link in this episode's description. And remember, stay curious. Hello, it's nice to see you. We're here, Climate Curious has made it to New York. We are here for New York Climate Week. We finally touched down and we're at the Symbiocene panel event. I'm joined by Willow. Well done, first of all. Absolutely spectacular job. You gave a fantastic answer to some kind of question about horizons and things that you are feeling passionate about, which included the answer being mushrooms or fungi. Anyway, that aside, if you want to know what that answer was, you're going to have to listen to the panel. You'll find it in the episode bio below. But I want to ask you, in the spirit of being in New York, obviously, New York Fashion Week has just passed. People are always talking about what's in and what's out during Fashion Week. And my question to you is, in Climate Week, the same thing, what's in and what's out?
I love this question. I'm going to start with what's out, which in the context of environmentalism, what I want to say is what's out is making people wrong. I think there's so much gatekeeping in the environmental movement, and so much of that comes from pointing fingers. It's an important part of activism to tell people what's working and what's not working, but we also want to be inviting people into this space. We need more everyday imperfect environmentalists than we need perfect environmentalists who devote their entire days and time to this cause. We need every single person involved and invited, and part of that means inviting people out of shame that often comes with pointing fingers. So what's out is making people wrong. What's in is getting curious, which means creating an environment in which learning is what's prioritized, inviting people to come into environmentalism through a lens of curiosity. Well, how are my everyday actions impacting the planet? How are my everyday actions impacting other people? What solutions do exist that I can implement on the local level, on the personal level? I think when people assume and make judgment calls, especially about the climate crisis, that's where we can lead to a lot of thinking around despair, which can be really paralyzing. When we actually can stay open and curious to say, you know, we really actually don't know where this story is going to go. We don't know exactly what the future holds. That's where we can actually create the space for possibility. And that goes hand in hand with curiosity. So what's in is curiosity.
Willow, such good answers. What's out is shame, despair. What's in is curiosity and questioning. I love it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wawa. I identify as a Gen Z climate activist. I've been in the climate space since I was 15 years old, so almost 10 years. And I'm the proud founder and executive director of a national organization called Black Girl Environmentalist. And we're all about creating infrastructures of care around Black women and Black gender expansive folks in the climate movement to make sure that there's equitable pathways for us to enter into climate, and then also infrastructure for us to stay. So I'm really excited to talk to you today.
In the spirit of being in New York, I'm going to ask you a question. And the question is, when it's New York Fashion Week, which has just passed, people always ask the question about what's in and what's out for Fashion Week. I'm going to ask you the same question, but in relation to Climate Week, what's in and what's out for climate?
What's out is perfect activism, because it doesn't exist. It doesn't exist, folks. What's in is imperfect activism. It's appreciating our whole selves and what we can bring into this movement, understanding that we're all multifaceted beings, and creating spaces where we're able to show up authentically. Because the reality is that our organizing spaces and the spaces that we're cultivating in our climate spaces are supposed to look and feel like the just climate future we're building. And if we don't create spaces that allow us to show up as our full selves, then what are we building towards?
If we're not creating spaces that are allowing us to show up as our full selves, then what are we building towards? I feel like literally every single thing that you're saying. So we're going to have to do this again. We'll get you to come on for a full episode. And until the next time, remember, stay curious. Climate Curious has landed in New York for New York Climate Week. We're here. We're super excited. Who are you? What do you do? What were you doing today?
Hello, I'm Kalpana. I am the founder of Nowadays on Earth, a social enterprise advocating for contact with nature, and I am a multi-hyphenate human being. I'm an urban greening activist, as well as a gardener and a technologist, and today I was co-hosting the Symbioscene with Isaias Hernandez from Queer Brown Vegan, which is basically a place to show up in solidarity and think about the possible new futures emerging from collapse.
Thank you so much for joining us, Kalpana. So what's in and what's out for New York Climate Week?
I'd say collective solidarity. There was a visceral energy during the march, and I think at every event I've been through, there's this sense of togetherness in a way that I've never felt so palpable before. In terms of what's out, fossil fuels. It's the end of fossil fuels, and I think just cut it out. We don't need it in our world as much as we think we do, and the addiction needs to stop.
Listen, you heard it here first. Just cut it out. It's done. It's over. Let it go. Let it die. So, thank you for joining us. So, we made it to New York. Climate Curious is here. We finally touched down for New York Climate Week. We're just at the end of the Symbioscene panel event. I'm joined by Isaias, who is one of the panelists.
My name is Isaias Hernandez. I'm an environmental educator and the content creator of Queer Brown Vegan, and I produce independent environmental media education.
And you are a seasoned professional. It's not your first rodeo with us, not your first time on the podcast. So excited to have you back for 2 years. What is in and what is out in climate?
I think what's in for New York Climate Week is mythology. And what's out is some of the simple things about how to empower the next generation. And I say this because I'm not trying to say those conversations are not needed. I do believe they're always needed and will continue to exist. However, I think as someone that's been in this space for so long, I've often felt that I've had to reject the spirituality side of myself. And so with the Symbioscene specifically, I've always believed that mythologies do not just exist in history, they exist right now. And that's something that I've been writing, is that making my own life into my mythology in my environmental work.
Isaias, man, thank you so much for sharing. Listen, this is just a flavor of the discussions that were being had on the panel earlier. If you'd like to listen to any more of those discussions, you can find the panel linked in the episode guide below. And thank you for joining us today. And remember, stay curious. Thank you for joining us this week. We really hope you enjoyed this episode.
If you did, please hit the follow button to make sure you get next week's release.
We are now officially crowdsourcing Climate Confessions, so please leave yours in the ratings and the reviews section, and we'll shout out for you next time. And shout out to our fabulous team behind the pod.
This episode was produced by Josie Coulter, artwork designed by Rebecca Mingus,
curation by Mariam Pasha,
mixed and engineered by Ben Beheshti,
music also by Ben Beheshti,
presented by Ben Hurst
and Mariam Pasha. Remember, stay curious.